is a test. This is a test. This is a test. This is July 18, 1995. This is an interview of Eric Wise of Duplex Milling here in Springfield, being made for the Clark County Historical Society for its permanent archives. I'll call you Eric, you call me Roland.
Okay.
Eric, I've just put on the tape while you were out the introductory statement that I was interviewing you for the benefit of the permanent archives of the Historical Society. I'd like to know, in your whatever manner you wish to present it, first of all, how Duplex, and give us the proper name of the company, how it got its beginning.
Well, the company's roots go back to 1884, when it was part of one of the O.S. Kelly companies. This is back at the end of the 19th century. This is one of the companies that Mr. Kelly started. It was set up as the Duplex Mill and Manufacturing Company, with a trade name known as Kelly Duplex, K-E-L-L-Y, and then second word D-U-P-L-E-X. The name of the company is the Duplex Mill and Manufacturing Company. Back in the latter years of the last century, there was a product, a burr mill, that was widely used throughout, let's say, United States and Canada, on farms, called a burr mill. It was used
B-U-R-R.
B-U-R-R. And this company was set up to make them at the location that it's presently located at the corner of Pleasant and Sigler Street on the west side of Springfield. These were simple agricultural implements at the time, and they weren't very large. They were used on farms with hand flywheels or hand cranks to turn them, or small engines that were available at that time, small steam engines, to turn them. And this was a fixed plate and a rotating plate, either 6 or 9 inches in diameter, called a simple burr mill. And back in those days, practically every farm in the country that had any amount of livestock at all had to have one of these mills to grind grain. And the group of people here came along with that product, and they came along then promptly with a better product, where there were 2 stationary plates and 2 rotating plates on the same shaft. So they developed a double burr mill, or a duplex burr mill, or a duplex mill, and that's where the name of the company comes from. This product, a double burr mill, or a duplex mill. The trade name, still being used, was a Kelly Duplex, and it was simply a reference to the Kelly double burr mill, Kelly Duplex.
I see.
It all kind of makes sense when you know the name and you know the product.
Yeah, I wondered about that. Now, a grinding of corn, for instance,
Grinding
to
of
get
corn,
chicken feed?
oats, wheat, to reduce them, because animals can get a lot more benefit from the grain when it's ground than they can just by eating the whole grain. They get several times the benefit from the ground grain as they do from the whole grain. A lot of the whole grain just passes through them, so it's a waste. It's a waste of a tremendous waste of feed, just to feed whole grain animals.
Mm-hmm.
So, these simple burr mills were much smaller, lighter, and simpler to use than stone mills, fashioned out of out of round stones, which was about the only alternative. So these things were very widely used.
I think I used one of these back when I was a kid working for my veterinarian uncle.
Any connection with a farm back at the end of the 1800s or the early 1900s, you probably would have been using a burr mill. Any connection with a farm at all. Now there were several makes. This was a competitive market, as a lot of things are, but these Kelly Duplex mills were used all over the country, and they were widely made. The facilities here consisted of, in the late 1800s, consisted of, a building was built then, a brick building, still in use today, and there was a foundry associated with the brick building on the west end. So what happened then was that the castings were poured out of cast iron, and then a procedure that resembled a bunch of numerous blacksmith stations down the length of the factory were used, where metal was hammered into shape. So there was no machining as such. So raw castings were used, and steel that could be bought from a mill in whatever shape it could be bought from, for example, 1-inch diameter or something like that, rough bars of steel, and some fashioning by heat and hammer fashioned these machines. And back in those days, you would find just overhead pulleys, big flat belts. It couldn't have been a very safe place to work, but we don't know much about the safety record back then. But at any rate, these machines were fashioned, and we do have literature and stuff that shows them in detail, and the advertising claims made about them and so on. And this basically went on for a number of years. By 1915. The company, the stock of the company, was bought out by several people. Chief among these was my grandfather, Willis Wise. He bought out a controlling interest with about 20 other shareholders, but he ended up being president of the company.
Now, from whom did he buy the stock?
Well,
Kelly?
From Kelly, yes, from the Kelly interests of the time, from this O.S. Kelly organization. And this O.S. Kelly entity still had as I understand it, still had a number of, and we have some old articles, which is some of the stuff that I think I can lay hands on. But yes, he bought these controlling shares from the O.S. Kelly interest, and there were about 20 people involved in that purchase. And gradually, I think it'd be interesting. I think we could get together even possibly a list of the names of these people.
Be very good.
And gradually, over a period of time, Willis Wise acquired more and more of these shares of stock. And well, Willis Wise was the after the Kelly interest. Willis Wise took over the company. And
where did he come from?
Okay, let me give a quick forward, then I'll go back.
Right.
But Willis Wise came from Springfield, Ohio. As far as the company goes, the company has been in the same family management ever since 1915. The control passed on first to Herbert, Willis's son Herbert, then Herbert's son Eric, which is myself, then this control hasn't passed yet, but there is an Eric Jr. currently working with the company. So this is, the company's management is in its fourth generation since 1915 on a continuous basis. Okay, Willis Wise comes from Springfield, Ohio. He is the son of William Wise of Medway, who was the son of Felix Wise from Medway, who was the son of George Wise, who came from Pennsylvania. Let's see if I can repeat this. In the New Carlisle Cemetery, just down the road, down old Route 40, there are 7 or 8 generations. I'll see if I can explain that, of this Wise family that you can find in that. And these are all direct descendants. There are many side issue, but these are direct descendants. But it started with Jacob, who fought in the War of 1812. Then Felix, who was operating in his prime probably around 1860. Then William, or Squire Wise, who as a young man fought in the Civil War. Then Willis Wise, who was a businessman in Springfield, Duplex Mill and Manufacturing Company. And then Herbert Wise, who graduated, who grew up on Woodlawn Avenue in Springfield and later on in a house on Old 40 west of Springfield, but then went to Wittenberg and graduated about 1926, and from there went directly into the company. And I'm just giving one line of succession. Then his son Eric Wise, who grew up on a farm in Clark County, not far from Midway. And then on that same farm, or one next door to it, Eric Wise Jr. Now I think I'm at 7 generations. Of course, I also think I started out talking about the cemetery in New Carlisle, but of course all these people are not in that cemetery. But everybody I mentioned who is not still alive is in that cemetery. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting thing. There's about 7 generations there, I guess.
Highly interesting. Be great for our records.
Now we have, to the extent that you're interested, we have full genealogical charts and information on this family.
Can they be copied?
Yeah, they could be copied. Given, yeah. So if you indicate an interest in that, we'll see what we can do.
I'll talk with our curator and see if we have anything at all on file. If not, we'll take everything.
Okay. But anyway, we have information written down on all the children were, who they married, who their children were, and so on, down through all of these generations. We have that pretty well down, complete.
Getting back to Willis, who bought into this company, what was his background from the standpoint of how did he acquire enough money to do it? Was he in business of some kind?
He was working here at the time, and I think it was a matter of not so much that I never understood that he had a particular lot of money. If you go back a couple generations in this family, Jacob and then to Felix. Felix Wise had a woolen mill in Medway, which was a significant operation. But the mill was a significant operation for a number of years, and it's its own story that how Felix learned how to make a water mill, how to make a woolen mill, how to use water power to run it, where he studied that, and so on. He studied up near Steubenville with another family. But anyway, he got a woolen mill together that produced blankets and fabrics for some time prior to the Civil War. Now, on the eve of the Civil War, and the family speaks of this, just prior to making it big, by having a woolen mill going into the Civil War, it burned down.
Oh boy.
So about, I think about 1860 or 1858, this woolen mill burned down. It was not rebuilt in Midway. However, by that time, Felix Wise was a substantial property owner in that area, and his son William was a substantial property owner in the area. Although the money back in those days came from Felix Wise. William fought in the Civil War. And there was enough money left over then by the end of the century to send William to send Willis to college, so that he had a college education.
Where did he go?
Well, Wittenberg, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly thereafter, he started to work for this O.S. Kelly Company, and was working here for some period of time when this O.S. Kelly decided that he or the business enterprise wanted to unload the business, and so he was on the spot. And I don't think that he actually had money to buy the operation outright. I think the operation was not particularly profitable, and I think that it was in debt. And I think that he assumed those responsibilities, as well as making some agreement to run it and pay so much on this purchase for a number of, for a period of time. And also, he didn't do it himself. He was a member of a group of about 20 people who formed a corporation and came up with enough money to swing this deal, whatever it took at the time.
And this building next door is the original?
Both the building next door and this house-like building that we're in were the original buildings.
Dating back to
1884.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Really historical.
Yeah, and I think back in the original days, I've read articles, and I think possibly I can lay my hands on some of this stuff about the original building of the building and where the railroad went through here, and how the railroad serviced this building, and the building across Sigler Street here, I think, was part of the same complex, as a matter of fact, originally.
Mm-hmm.
Back in, I think that building was here first, and this was like an addition to that plan. Now, the building across the street has been through numerous hands. It's now a Robinson Myers plant, but it's been through several corporate structures, whereas this area over here has just been one. In fact, it's although it's had only two managements, it's only had one continuous purpose as a machinery fabrication plant.
And one family lineage. Four generations.
4 generations. Since from 1915 to the current 1995.
This is probably a record for Clark County, isn't it?
I don't know. I mean, it might well be a record for almost anywhere, because that's a long time.
Yeah. When you think of the Shetland family, there are only 2 generations there.
This is Willis, Herbert, Eric, and Eric Jr.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 4 generations here so far.
And Willis was probably the first college graduate of the lineage.
You're asking if
Jacob went to college.
Or if William went to college.
No, I lost William. Where's he?
Okay, if you go back, Jacob was the person that came to this area from Pennsylvania.
No.
About 1840, and then there was Felix, his son Felix, then William, then Willis.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
William is called Squire Wise because for about 40 years or so after the Civil War, he was injured in the Civil War and never. He was a big man, but he served as Justice of the Peace for about 40 years in Midway. Now, back in those days, Midway was a little bit more of a dynamic community than it is today. It's a rural community, and that was a different life, of course. Today, it's just out in the county. But back in those days, it had its own viable economy, and this was an interesting position to have, Justice of the Peace. But anyway, he was Justice of the Peace for a number of years there, and I'm sure that didn't pay very much, but family tradition has it that when he needed money, he would sell one of the lots that he had inherited from his father, Felix, which were all over the community. Felix had acquired a lot of wealth and property back in the 1850 period of time, I think. The product of the company, we do know some of the trials and tribulations, some of the big deals, and so on. The product of the company, going back to 1884 and back up through 1915 and on up to after World War II, was mainly machinery used in feed mills and/or large farms throughout the United States, and some of it was always exported. Since that has changed very substantially today, to the point where this machinery is even bigger than it ever used to be, bigger and more sophisticated, and the use of it is now what probably would be referred to as industrial rather than feed mills and farms, although it's still used there only in the very largest units. It's used generically. The machinery line of the company grew and broadened, and of course some things were dropped out, from grain grinding machinery to mixing and conveying machinery, and combinations of machine that make complete feed mills to make animal feed, and from there to spin off into human food.
Over the last several years, I've seen these huge things out on farms with it looks like an elevator or a silo and big pipes coming out from it.
Probably a bucket elevator. It may be a tower that goes up in the air with pipes coming out.
Yeah.
That's a bucket elevator. That's a conveyor that takes grain and takes it up maybe as much as 100 feet, and then delivers it by gravity to various places where the people want to put it.
That's not necessarily a mixer.
No, it's probably not a mixer if it's that large. A mixer typically that would be used in a farm or feed mill probably is a machine of around 200 cubic feet or so. But the company went from burr mills, and then in the late 30s and 40s began to manufacture feed mixers. This is a vertical spiral mixer where the ingredients are introduced into a vessel, and inside the vessel there's a helicoid screw that lifts material to the top, and when the material gets to the top of the vessel, it's spread out in a circle and then comes back down in the vessel by gravity, where it's picked up at the bottom and spread out and taken back down until it's cycled through there a number of times and becomes quite well mixed.
Will you spell that word, helicoid?
Helicoid screw.
Will you spell that word for the typist?
Helicoid. What is it? The Archimedes screw. It's the same thing. It's just like it's a continuous spiral, and by rotating it, material will be elevated inside the machine, and it becomes a mixer. And the company has had other naturally related products like screw conveyors that use these silicoid spirals to convey material horizontally and at an incline, and for all kinds of purposes. Broadly and generically, the type of machinery that the company has been manufacturing, say in the 40s and 50s and 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, has been bulk material handling machinery, and the applications have been quite broad. Anywhere where bulk materials need to be handled by people, by men, to do things, and to make things, and to make products.
So you're not nearly as closely related to agriculture as originally.
Well, today we're not very closely related to agriculture at all. Probably the evolution of the machinery has been such that it has become quite expensive, and a very, very high quality, quite expensive machinery that is generally thought of in being used in industrial applications, where the machines are used 24 hours a day for 7 days a week, and they run continuously throughout the year, with sometimes never being shut off. And the application of the machine is then for us to build a machine for use in that environment that requires shutdown and maintenance as little as possible. So this becomes very heavy, high quality machinery that typically is not needed on a farm where the use might be for a couple hours a week. It's simply not required, and it's not economically feasible to put them on a farm anymore.
What's the product that you would be handling the most at current times?
At current times, the machinery easily handles more plastic compounds than anything. Dry mixing of dry plastic compounds before any number of things are made out of these compounds. Plastic powders that are mixed to get different consistencies, different temperatures, different colors, different kinds of plastics blended together in different intensities before they're finally introduced into the rotational molding process, or the blow molding process, or injection molding process, and then any number of things, plastic things, are made from them. But plastics easily is been more and more important to us, and this has been true. This has been increasingly true for 20 years, and it's quite true today.
How about the great cereal business up in Michigan, Grand Rapids and so on? Did you ever furnish them any machinery?
Oh yes, and still do today, although a lot of that machinery has spun off into very specialized. It's a lot of machinery in many industries is spun off from general purpose to specialized machines that do particular things, and this company has not been very much involved in the general things, in the general mixers, conveyors, and so forth. We're still in those markets, but when you think of the consumer cereal products that you see in the grocery store, in the direct production of those cereals, probably not.
In World War I, what happened to your product?
Well, you're going back to the area in World War I, you're going back to the area where Willis seceded to control of the corporate structure that was here, and I don't know that anything in particular happened.
Still had a foundry?
Still had a foundry, still fabricated in about the same manner. still building burr mills until well into the 20s.
But you weren't making cannons or
No
ammunition?
No, none of that kind.
No.
Nothing of that kind. That period, there's a lot of years here, and that period was promptly succeeded by the booming 20s, where things as far as I ever knew, were pretty good, pretty active. Herbert Willis's son, Herbert, went to college. Herbert was born in 1904, so he grew up in the period that you're talking about. He's a young man in World War I. As a matter of fact, his brother was in World War I. He was a flyer, flew Jennings. And then he went to college at the end of the, let's see, 1904, 1924. In the early 20s, he would have been in college. I think he was out by 1926. He's a graduate of Wittenberg and came to work here. And at that time, the company underwent quite a bit of expansion. It was quite dynamic until 1930, and then that took them into the Depression, and things were as tough and as bad as you ever hear here in the Depression, because nobody had any. This was a manufacturing company that depended upon its existence to manufacture and sell machinery. And nobody had any money to buy any machinery. So it didn't work real well for 5 years or so. 5 or 6 years. Everything was kind of in a holding pattern, and I think people just worked a few hours. That is, the people on the payroll just worked a few hours a week, while the others just beat the bushes all over the country trying to get a sale here, a sale there. But the end of that, the close of that period was when Willis in 1938 was killed just a couple blocks from the office here in a train accident. There was at that time two lines went through Springfield, generally one in each direction, and at the Main Street tracks, which is only about 2 or 3 blocks from the office here, I think that he had been home to lunch or been to lunch or something like that in the middle of the day, and apparently was preoccupied and in a hurry to get back to the office, and a train had gone by in one direction, and as soon as the train cleared the intersection, he pulled out across the track, and when he did so, I think he pulled right in front of another train. And so the close of the Depression in 1938 kind of came about at that time. So Herbert was on his own then. He had just been married, I think, in 35, so he was newly married, had no children. But I think that his wife, Eva, was, at the time that his father was killed, his wife was in the hospital in very serious condition with some with a toxic condition, having their first child in 1938, Fred. So this all happened at the same time. 1938 must have been quite a year here. But after 1938, the war came. Herbert was, what was he, in his late 30s, early 40s? He was a little old, I guess, to go marching off to war, and he stayed, managed the company on the home front. This company at the time and what it was doing was considered some kind of had some kind of a priority in the consideration of the economy, and it was some official designation that it was making essential machinery because of the mixing and grinding machinery that produced food.
Yeah.
And the world at that time had an unending need for this machinery and for the food, so they actually got everything had to be allotted, because the machinery was made out of steel, and they were allotted enough steel to actually make quite a bit of machinery during the war, and So you go into the World War II era, and you come out of it, and that was a very busy, hectic time. You come out of it in 1945, and that was a boom time. It was a boom time for this company.
Excuse me, during World War II, you were permitted to continue your regular product line.
Yes.
You didn't have to go into
Not into defense.
war material.
No, because in fact the scarce resources, motors and bearings and steel, were allocated to some companies like this because of the product that they built. They were considered essential domestic economy machinery, and mainly because of their role in producing food for animals, or feed for animals, and of course animals fed humans. So that companies like this had to be kept going. Now they were controlled. They couldn't have unlimited production, and they couldn't produce as much as they could sell. But they had quite a little economy.
Mm-hmm. Did you have an uncle with Herbert in the business?
Well, Arthur.
Somewhere I heard this.
Well, yeah, Arthur was his brother. If you go back, essentially no. The answer to that is essentially no. Arthur had some stock that he had from their father Willis, but Arthur essentially he went to Wittenberg. He was in World War II, and then he went to work for Westinghouse and followed a career in as an electrical engineer. He dabbled some, played around some with working at the Duplex Mill Company, but decided that his interest lay elsewhere, actually.
Mm-hmm. So we get into the prosperous years of post-World War II.
Post-World War II, very prosperous years, because you could hire a workforce easily. You could sell just about anything that you could make. So there was not much limit to what you could do. Everything came pretty easily for probably 15 years. The economy also, the capital structure of the entire economy required this kind of machinery. It didn't have enough. So it was being placed at every crossroads. At every small town had a railroad running through it, and that railroad, somewhere along the railroad in the town, they would make an elevator all across the United States. Now, in more recent times, all of those plants are in ruins. The economic times have changed, but there was a time from 1940 to 1960 where those places were built and expanded and just went on and on. And then the whole nature of farming and the agricultural industry changed completely. For example, the combine, it changed from the corn picker to the combine. Mm-hmm. All kinds of new machines eliminated the country elevator. Different. Instead of all these farms raising livestock and so on, livestock became raised in huge, monstrous feedlots, and the country elevator supported the small farmer, and the small farmer, with his 50-acre to 100-acre farm, providing a livelihood for a family, started to disappear in the 50s, and then has disappeared since. So that whole economy that boomed from 1940 to 60 has disappeared.
During this period, after Willis died, Herbert was pretty much on his own, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. As far as family was concerned.
That's right.
Until his sons grew up.
Now, let's see. His son Frederick probably came to work here in the company, and again, Herbert's son Frederick went to Wittenberg and probably came to work here in about 1958. And then his son Eric who went to Dartmouth College out east and was in the Army for a period of time, that's myself, came to work here in 1967. So there was 1938, and Herbert was in harness for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, he started in 1926, and then he had the full responsibility in 1938. So then you have 48 and 58 and 68. And then, how long is that? 38, 48, 58, 68.
40 years.
It's a good 40-year career at least.
Yeah.
He got out of here in about probably 1970, 71. He turned the operation over to those sons. And he said, "Oh, now, essentially moved on to in 1935 when he was married and before he had children.
Mm-hmm.
And the families added some to the initial farm holdings, but still live. The farm is in southeastern Clark County.
Years ago, with the Leibolds, my wife and I visited your home, which was near, it must have been on the farm that you were just referring to.
Well, Dad only ever had one home.
Well, that was it
married
then.
life.
Yeah. And there was a nice eating place not far from there with an unusual name.
Like Treybine Manor or something?
There you are.
Is that it?
Yeah, yeah.
That's an old one.
Yeah.
Treybine Manor. I'm 55, and the Treybine Manor probably has not been in existence for at least 30 years.
Well, you see, I'm 85.
Yeah, but you're probably going back into the 50s there.
Yeah.
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 Well, that was a wonderful place to eat.
Uh-huh.
We used to go there frequently, particularly on Sunday or something like that, and people would come from miles and miles around.
Mm-hmm.
The guys who ran it, the man who ran it, I think his name was Brown, and eventually his health failed, and the people who tried to keep the restaurant open simply didn't have his touch, which was just the case, and it eventually deteriorated and closed.
Mm.
But that's the Treybine Manor. And I think I have when you walked in, I was going to ask you, have I met you before? I think I probably have.
Oh, I'm sure you have.
Maybe perhaps at the Leibold's home.
A long time ago. Yeah. Leibolds were very close to us for a number of years.
I would guess maybe in let me think. Probably in the late 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Very likely.
Yeah. I have to switch the tape. Give it a little time.
Of course, Adrian died, I don't know if you...
Just recently, yeah.
Last summer, I guess.
Totally blind.
I don't know if you hear from Virginia or not anymore.
We hear from her at Christmas time, and she's been... she, through Adrian, had been very helpful to the church, First Lutheran, where we all belonged. Yeah, that's interesting. And your mother, is she alive?
Eva is alive, but Eva has had progressive Alzheimer's now for 5 or 6 years. So that's a pretty tragic story.
Yeah, yeah.
Herbert is alive and actually quite sharp and in pretty good health for somebody 91.
Yes.
Gets around pretty good. If you want to if you're interested in pursuing any of your interviewing, he may well enjoy talking to you.
Good.
We can leave that possibility open. I'll mention it to him.
Do that. Either come in here or I go out there. One of the two.
You might enjoy going out there.
I think I would. Yeah.
He lives with us, but we live right across the creek from where you would have been before.
I couldn't find it. Well, it's a good direction. Okay. Now, all these times of post-World War II prosperity, what would you say the maximum employment in numbers was here?
Well, that's a good question, but I don't. I think I was generally, well, I know I was generally around. I worked here as a boy. Uh, you see, until about 10 or 15 years ago, the foundry operation continued.
Did it?
And there were 15 people employed there and about 45 people employed elsewhere, so probably about 60.
Uh-huh.
Current employment is probably about 40.
Comparable to Parker Sweeper? About
Similar, yeah, probably. Probably the 40 are producing about a comparable products to the 60 of 1955 or so.
Sure.
Because you have to find ways to produce more and more with fewer and fewer people. Because relatively speaking, people have become in a business of making machinery. People are your most expensive component.
Mm-hmm. Have you had a union situation?
No, there've been
Attempts.
there've been a couple attempts over the years, but never anything of any significance. Just some agitation.
Okay, we'll wind this up with some observations pending the next time we get together. What do you think about the current business level in Springfield, and does it look to you like a healthy one?
There's a lot of aspects to a question like that. In giving an extemporaneous answer to that, there's a couple elements. One, the support for a business is probably less than in the past. There is, I'm talking about a manufacturing business when I'm talking about this. There is more and more of a significant nature of harassment of business units. By that I mean governmental regulations to be complied with that are just wasteful and inefficient and don't accomplish what they set out to accomplish, but cost a lot of money. So there's all kinds of harassments of business. There is probably less appreciation of the importance of wealth-creating businesses in the economy than probably the appreciation in the past. In other words, we can't all feed each other McDonald's hamburgers. At some point you have to create wealth, and you do that by building machines or other capital products, factories and productive units. Our education system, where in the past the educational system, the high schools, produced citizens that were educated at a level that they were useful to the economy that they found themselves in when they graduated. Today, their education is shockingly inadequate. Therefore, a business they're almost they're almost useless. They've been after all, they've been in school for 12 years.
But they're not trained in anything.
What they've been taught is almost useless in today's world. Now they can go on to become, and many of them do, of course, go on to college. But even the colleges and the liberal arts orientation that they have ends up being a big waste of time, and they end up coming back on the job market, and they still don't know anything useful to support themselves. Even this company, as and certainly not a leader in technology and so on, but it operates at a technical level that is far beyond anything that the schools are producing in the way of students and education that they can cope with. It's just the world is a total mystery to these people, and they're non-operative. So the educational, so the so you have a system where the bureaucrats overregulate. The typical citizen has little appreciation of what's going on in their own wealth creating units, and the educational system is not producing an education that has very much relevance to the real world that they're dumping these students into. So, on an extemporaneous basis, an answer to the question is it's very uncertain.
Mm-hmm. Where do you get a new employee? From JVS, is that any help?
We try to from anywhere, and I'll tell you that it very often, yes, we bring in JVS students. They typically the typical new employee that you bring into an environment of this kind is a person looking for a big income, but a person that has very little knowledge or background and doesn't have the patience to train or learn a body of knowledge commensurate with his demand for income. So there's a lot of coming and going all the time, where people come and they learn, and what they find out is that they're going to have to be here for a couple of years before they really know anything. So they want to go on over and try some other job where they don't really have to know very much, and can get paid just as much without having to really know anything.
Generally speaking, your criticism is leveled at the nation, not just Springfield.
That's right, and I'd gone through my mind to touch on that. It's not limited to Springfield. Although I think some communities are a little more supportive, maybe of their local businesses than Springfield. But I don't think that's on anything significant. But we know from being in business, and particularly from what we produce, that our competition is not a company across town or in northern Ohio or in eastern Tennessee or something. It's absolutely worldwide. When our customers are considering the purchase of this machinery that we make, they're considering products from all over the world. And we are trying to sell and do sell overseas in environments that where competition is from Western Europe and Japan and Taiwan and Indonesia. And these are all possibilities for people to buy anymore. There's practically no limits to, in fact, no geographical limits. You can just pick up the phone and order a machine or order what you want from anywhere in the world, and it'll be here. And by air freight, it'll be here shortly.
Mm-hmm. Who in your corporate structure worries and handles the international financing of a product sale?
Well, we work. I do, but there's other people that can function. We work with the banks that give us a lot of help and a lot of expertise.
Good.
We ask questions and get support. You haven't exactly asked the question, but if I were to comment on the most significant development in the business in the past 5 to 10 years, it would be the amazingly accelerating level of technology and of knowledge and people's demand for instant information. Our customers simply will not wait for a letter anymore. They demand answers by telephone, and they don't even want to wait for telephone because they have to be somewhere before you can talk to them.
Yeah.
So they want computer communications. They want fax communications. We just in the past year, there's some good examples. We've dealt with General Electric Corporation, the second largest corporation in the country, and recently, well, our experience was that they wanted a drawing. Well, you normally think of a drawing, in the past, a drawing of a machine is something that we've produced for years. You produce a drawing, you get it approved, then you make the machine according to the drawing. Well, the drawing consists of a man sitting at a drawing board. He makes the drawing, he gets information from wherever he gets it, a variety of places, and he makes the drawing, and the drawing's on a piece of paper, and then you make copies of this, and you send it by mail or by Federal Express or something to wherever it's going, and then there's consultation maybe on phone, and people mark up drawings. Well, General Electric told us that they don't want any drawings. They just want AutoCAD representations, which is a computer drawing. Now, the computer drawing can actually be printed on paper. There's nothing unusual about making the drawing on a computer and printing it on paper, except they don't want it on paper. They don't want any paper. They want the actual computer file, because the drawing that we make that represents our machine can be taken, and that file can be put on their computer, and then the representation of that machine can be put into their plant operation, and it fits exactly into their plant operation. They can tell how far it is, how high it is, what has to hook up to it within fractions, thousandths of an inch, actually. So, and they don't even want to wait until the file can be copied onto a disk and mailed to them or sent by Federal Express. They want it immediately by modem.
Yeah.
They want the information transferred from our computer to their computer, and if you can do it, they're just as happy as can be.
My land.
And you can imagine. I mean, we've all been back to school. I mean, that's one thing that we do. I personally have gone to school and studied this thing until I can do it myself. Not that I do it from day in and day out, but I can do it, and knowing how to do it allows me to work with people that are doing it.
Sure, you have the comprehension.
Yeah. But you can imagine these people walking in and say, I'd like to have a job, and this is what's going on. Everything, you just wouldn't suspect it, but things are going on, are controlled, and are revolved around computers even in this company. Mm-hmm. If you look in the corner back of you, there's stuff going on today. This is a network. This is the latest advancement where everything is tied together in a network here. You don't even have a desk with a computer that belongs to you. You can sit down anywhere and work in the same manner as though you're the computer that you're used to. They're all the same now, mm-hmm. or will be shortly, within a week or so here.
Well, sir, I have taken an hour and a quarter of your time. I appreciate it a great deal. So we'll bring this first interview to a close with my expression of deep appreciation for what I've learned.
Good.
And of real help to the Historical Society. We'll get together sometime.
Give me something, probably wait till the summer passes, and I'll keep this in mind and gather some material and give me a call, and I'll try to have some historical information together for you.